Margaret White never described herself as a strong woman. If you asked her, she would say she was simply doing what needed to be done. She had lived in the UK for almost 17 years. South London first. Then later, a modest semi-detached house in Croydon. Not large, not polished, but steady. The kind of house that told you someone had worked for it. She worked as a healthcare assistant at a private care home just outside Thornton Heath. 12-hour shifts were normal. Night shifts even more so. The kind of job where your back begins to complain before your mouth does. Where you learn to lift patients gently, even when your own body is tired. Where you keep your voice calm for people who cannot remember their own names. Margaret was good at it. Not because she loved the work, but because she understood responsibility. She had 3 children. 2 boys and a girl. And a husband. Daniel. Daniel did work. But not in a way that carried the family. He drove occasionally. Short contracts. Deliveries. Things that came and went. Margaret never made an issue of it. If anything, she protected him from it. When relatives asked questions, she answered carefully. Daniel is handling things, she would say. Even when she knew she was the one holding everything together. The mortgage came from her account. The utility bills. Hers. School uniforms. Hers. Groceries. Hers. But when it came to decisions, she stepped back. Not out of fear. Out of intention. She had grown up in a home where her father's pride mattered more than his comfort. And her mother knew how to keep peace without making noise. Margaret carried that lesson into her own marriage. So when they were ready to buy the house, the solicitor asked a simple question. Whose name will be on the property? Margaret did not hesitate. My husband's. The solicitor looked up briefly. And yours? She smiled politely. It's fine. Daniel sat beside her, quiet. Not insisting. Not refusing. Just allowing it. At the time, it did not feel like a loss. It felt like balance. Like she was holding something together that could easily fall apart. And for years, it worked. Or at least, it looked like it did. The children grew. They respected their father. Listened when he spoke. Ran to him first with news from school. Margaret watched it happen in small moments. When her daughter came home excited about an award, she called out. Daddy, look. Margaret stood in the kitchen, still in her uniform, one hand resting on the counter. She smiled. Not because it did not hurt. But because she believed she was building something bigger than herself. Recognition could wait. Family came first. That was how she lived. Until her body began to change. At first, it was something she ignored. A tiredness that sleep did not fix. A heaviness in her legs after shifts. She told herself it was age. Stress. Work. She adjusted. Took extra tea breaks when she could. Sat down longer than usual before standing again. But then the pain started. Sharp. Sudden. Not constant, but enough to interrupt her. One night at work, she struggled to lift a patient she had lifted many times before. Her colleague noticed. Margaret, are you okay? I'm fine, she said quickly. But she was not. And deep down, she knew it. Still, she kept going. Because stopping would mean explaining. And explaining would mean admitting that she could no longer carry everything. That idea made her more uncomfortable than the pain itself. At home, nothing changed. Dinner still got made. Laundry still got done. Bills still got paid. Daniel still moved through the house with quiet authority. And the children still saw him as the center of it all. Margaret did not correct that image. Even when her body began to slow down. Even when she started taking longer to get out of bed in the mornings. Even when she began forgetting small things she would never forget before. Then one morning, on a cold weekday that felt no different from the others, her body gave her an answer she could not ignore. She collapsed. Not dramatically. No warning, no scream. She simply lost balance at work and went down. The room did not spin. It just stopped holding her up. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer at the care home. White ceiling. Soft beeping somewhere to her left. The smell of antiseptic. A hospital. It took a moment for her to understand what had happened. Longer to accept it. A doctor came later. Introduced himself. Spoke in a measured tone. Tests would be needed. Then more tests. Then a conversation that stretched longer than she expected. He explained her condition carefully. Not rushed. Not softened. Serious. Manageable, perhaps, but only with proper treatment. Rest. Monitoring. Time away from work. Margaret listened quietly. Her first thought was not fear. It was calculation. Time away from work meant no income. No income meant pressure. Pressure meant everything she had been holding together would begin to shift. Still, she nodded. Asked the right questions. Thanked the doctor. And when he left, she reached for her phone. Daniel answered on the second ring. I'm at the hospital, she said. There was a pause. What happened? I collapsed at work. They're running tests. Another pause. Longer this time. Is it serious? They think it might be. Silence. Then, okay. I'll come later. Later. Not now. Margaret looked at the phone for a moment before placing it beside her. She told herself not to read into it. People react differently. That was what she believed. That was what she chose to believe. The children came that evening. They stood near the bed. Not too close. Asked questions. Listened to her answers. Then checked their phones when the room grew quiet. Daniel came last. He stood at the foot of the bed. Hands in his pockets. Looking at her, but not quite seeing her. You'll be fine, he said. It sounded like a statement. Not reassurance. Margaret nodded. Because she did not yet have the strength to question it. Days passed. Then a week. Then another. The visits became shorter. Less frequent. Excuses began to replace presence. Work. School. Traffic. Life. Margaret remained in that hospital bed long enough to notice the pattern. Long enough to feel something she had never allowed herself to feel before. Not fear. Not even sadness. But distance. A quiet, growing distance between her and the people she had built everything for. And for the first time in years, Margaret asked herself a question she had avoided for too long. If she stopped carrying everything, what would be left? Episode 2 reveals what started changing behind her back, while she was still in that hospital bed. Stay with this story. Some decisions feel right when you make them, until life tests them.